Okay, so for my project, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be teaching you guys a different way to kind of bring out some of the different aspects of your percussion. If you're making, probably would work in anything, but it works particularly well in electronic music. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a found sound, so a not necessarily musical sound, and we're going to be putting it underneath a drum sound just to kind of spice things up and to highlight some of the best parts, and create kind of a new part underneath. It's a cool technique I've used in a lot of different ways, which I'll get into a little bit more later. But basically, the setup here is real basic. I got my files all here, tracks rather. They're all labeled. I brought everything into Ableton already so that you wouldn't have to watch me just bring files in. That's not all that exciting. And on a side note too, all of this works for any DAW, and any plugins you use, and any drum machine, and any samples. Like, none of this is unique to Ableton. So you can take these different techniques and you can use them in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different places. So what we're doing is we're going to be taking the sound of somebody breaking branches, like little twigs and sticks, whatever, all that, and we're going to be putting it underneath a snare sound. So what I have so far is I have the drum machine here, and you can see the sample right here. It's this snare, nice and snappy, pretty cool. I like it, but it could use a little bit more spice to it. And then the sample I've chosen, these breaking sticks, and what we're going to be doing is we're basically going to be using that to simulate the sound of the stick hitting the drum, but kind of on steroids. It's real fun. So what we're going to do first is we're going to look at this sample right here, and we're going to pick which part of the sample we want to use, because we don't want the whole thing to play every time we hit the pad. So I like this one personally, so we'll go with my choice. I just like that it has a slightly deeper pitch. So I'm going to just take everything here. What I'm doing here is I'm just going to crop everything, all the kind of stuff I don't want to use, all that junk out, so that it's a little bit easier to manage. And then from here, what you do is you just go back over to your drum rack, drag this audio file. Oh, just it'll let me do that. No. There, I was getting ahead of myself. And then you hold Alt, and you just release. When you hold Alt, it'll combine the two samples really, into a single instrument rack within the drum rack, and there you go. So let's take a listen to what we have now. All right, not bad. There is a big issue immediately obvious though, which is that the branch sound hits quite a bit after the snare. So what we're going to want to do is we're just going to want to kind of bring this up and start testing it to see how well it blends. All right, hits a little bit after, bring it up further. And the reason I don't just bring it up to the front is because sometimes it does sound good kind of layered and staggered, the delay, depending on what kind of feel you want. So there's no real rules in terms of that. Use your ear, obviously, to determine what sounds best for your production. All right, it's getting a little closer. There. Turns out in this case we kind of want it pretty much on it. And the first thing I'm going to do after that is take this tail down just a little bit. There, not a little, probably leaves rustling. I don't honestly know what it is. In the sample is gone. Ta-da, we have this. So what I kind of want to do with this one is, just because it's so brief and kind of high-pitched, I'm going to try transposing it down, which Ableton makes really easy. This might be somewhere where you can do it on other DAWs, but it might not be this easy. I know on Reason it's pretty simple, and on Reaper I've done this, and on a lot of different things, but every DAW has its quirks, so, don't just take it at face value that no matter what program or what plugin you're going to be using, this is going to be there. It should be. It makes things nice, but it might not be. So we're just going to take this, we're going to transpose, which is dropping the pitch down, basically. Oh, hello. That's a little much, but sounds pretty cool. Okay, I like that. That sounds pretty heavy. They conflict a little bit though, so this next part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and show you a little bit about blending the two. So the first thing you generally want to do before you add any kind of signal processing is just play with the volume. The snare sound is really cool, and the branch sounds are really cool, but in terms of how much of which one we want, I think in general you want more of the drum sound, because that's going to be what people can kind of identify and listen to, and it won't just sound like a click. We're using the other sample to enhance the sound, not to replace it. So I'm going to start by just bringing down the volume here, just to kind of get a blend going. That's it without it. There. Again, without it, with it, without it, with it, without it, with it. Snappy, big, heavy. It'll cut through. That's kind of what we want. And the reason I say that it works for electronic music in particular is I find that it works really well for kind of hip-hop based beats, and it works really well for kind of the epic dance music where you have tons of pads going on, because it'll help give it that extra punch to sort of cut through without you needing to blast all the levels and kind of sort of ruin the quality of your sound. That's, I guess, a subjective thing, but I don't particularly like it when you have to do that. So now that we have this, what I am going to do is we're going to use a little bit of signal processing just to kind of sweeten these things up a little bit, just so that everything sort of has its own place, even just within this sound. So what I'm going to do, again, I'm just going to use native Windows plugins, not Windows, excuse me, Ableton plugins, because I just kind of want to illustrate it, and they're really nice because they have nice graphical interfaces, so you can kind of see what's going on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take first the compressor. This is just the standard one. It's been in Ableton for a really, really long time. And we're on the snare right here. I'm just going to tack this on here real quick. Excuse me there. And I'm assuming you already know what a compressor does when you watch this video. So if you don't, there's like plenty of videos you can look at to see what it does and the different ways you can use it. Basically, what we're going to be using it for is we're just going to be using it to sort of shape the sound just a tiny bit. So what I want to do is give it a good fast attack. You know, something that kind of hits pretty much right away. And then give it a pretty short release, because what I want to do is I just kind of want to barely bring the volume down so that these are different ways you can like visualize it too. I'll show you what it looks like. But that way, just so that the branch sort of has a little bit of space for it to shine without having to blast it and sort of have the two things conflict. So I'll probably turn up the ratio just a bit to like 4. That tends to be what works for whenever I'm doing these things, so that's honestly the main reason. Obviously, tweak it to ear. And if you can't hear the difference right now, these things are kind of subtle, but just listen close, you'll hear it. It's also something you kind of just get used to over time, particularly with compression. I struggled a lot with exactly what I was doing to the sound, and then one day it clicked. So this is actually a great way to experiment with compression, just to sort of see what each thing does. On a really extreme level, you can kind of hear it. If you bring the threshold all the way down, right? So that's sort of if the whole thing is being squashed. And then if I bring it down, so you can see you can really, really, really change the sound. But we're not trying to alter it that much. What we really want to do is just give it a little bit of space. So, oh yeah, I gotta bring the threshold up. Don't forget, the threshold's like the most important thing. That's when the sound starts to hit. The compressor starts to hit rather. So if it's really low, then as soon as anything crosses over it, the compressor's gonna act. So that sounds pretty good without it. you know, you get a little bit of the snare, but really what you get is bring that up just a little bit more. What you really get is that stick hitting, which I think sounds real nice. Then what I'm gonna do on the outside here is I'm gonna take a fancy new Ableton plugin. They only put this in to Ableton 9, which is what I'm using, which is it's cool. It works and has a slightly different character, but to be completely honest, you can achieve the same effects without the kind of like little esoteric bits. You can achieve the same effects with the other compressor. So you don't need to worry about not having this one, but it's also just nice to show you the different graphics, which also I said I would do. So that's one way of visualizing it. You can look down here. That's another way of visualizing it. Some people find that more helpful. And this is another way. It's kind of like the heart meter thing. I've never really used it before. Sure does look cool, though. Anyways, I still sometimes get amazed with the new graphical technology we have for visualizing sound. But this is what we got, so we're going to take a look at this other compressor right over here. Just gonna... Oops. Take that down, and basically what I did there is I just minimized it so that I don't have to deal with the mess of having everything. That can get exhausting too. Same controls, it's still a compressor, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the threshold down a bit. Okay. I don't want to acting on it that much, I'm really just trying to, as it says, glue it together. And what I'm going to be doing there is I don't want to change the character of what I just created too much, so I'm going to give it like a kind of, you could say long attack. This is how long it takes for the compressor to work. And then I'm going to take the threshold down a little bit more. And that's just kind of to glue everything together so that the two sounds blend a little bit. And then from here it's kind of fine tweaking. So to show you, with the glue, without the glue, with the glue, without the glue. So my main criticism of my own work right now is that the breaking sticks is still a little harsh. So because I've made some space with it, I feel like I can actually get away with taking a bit out of the snare, rather out of the stick, so that the snare can shine through a little bit more. And I might even bring it down just another step, maybe a couple more. Actually, yeah, I don't know why I didn't do that before. That sounds great. With the reduced volume, kind of gives the snare a hollow tone. I can definitely imagine this in some kind of glitch hop, epic electronic tune as the main snare. You might want, if you were going to use it for that, you might want to layer kind of another synth snare underneath it. That's up to you, really. But yeah, so just to go back to make things clear, this is what we started with. This is what we ended with. And I still don't really like that. Yeah, that sounds a little bit better. Started, ended, power. Cool. Awesome. Actually, let's do this a little bit more accurately. That's also something you can constantly remember, which is the signal processing and the signal chain. If you really want to get a naked picture, as it were, of what we had before, this is what it is. And then, all together, that's what we have. Power. So that's kind of how you do this. This technique works. I've used it with my friend in productions. We've layered the sound of baked beans boiling on a stove. We've put that behind claps. That's a little bit more of an effect, but it does definitely brighten up the sound of the clap, particularly if you put it on the tail. What else have I done? With rim shots, I've put the sound of a Zippo lighter opening and closing. That actually sounds real cool. You can also just use that sound as a kind of odd percussion in your productions as well. I've used that to what I think is a cool effect. And the only thing I'm really going to go over now is just kind of some basic drum sequencing stuff. Not sequencing, treatment, which is just kind of more along the lines of getting this to blend together. might just tack on some reverb. Something, some people tend to like the really big giant snare sound, but I kind of come from the school of thought that doesn't like that so much. Maybe it's just because I used to listen to a lot of early hip hop where that's not necessarily the case. Way too much, for example, for my tastes. And I don't think it really helps the blend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this down. Oh, that's already better. Take it down even more. The pre-delay is just basically, it's similar actually to the attack with the compressor. This is just how long until the reverb kicks in. And I'm going to bring that down. And the size, I like to kind of emulate the plate reverb effect on snares, unless I'm doing like a jazz project where I kind of want the sound of the room. So the size and a lot of different reverbs is sort of simulating that, the size of the room. So I'm going to bring that way down. Don't want any chorus. Don't need any diffusion. Want to bring that down even more. That's just playing with the different settings of the emulated room or the plate. So yeah, now we have kind of a cool drum sound. Bring that down a little bit more. My general rule with reverb is to kind of set it the way you like how it sounds, the reverb itself, and then just kind of bring it down until you can barely hear it, because usually just a little bit of reverb goes a long way. So there you go. You've created, if you followed along, a pretty cool, unique, and powerful drum sound, snare sound in this case, and you've sort of learned the different techniques to get them to all, to get different sounds to blend together. The other things you could do is you could tack on an EQ at any different point and kind of balance the frequency spectrums of each one. Like I guess in this case, with a little bit more time, what I would do is I would kind of find where the snare is strongest in its attack and where the stick is strongest in its attack, kind of like that clicking sound, and I would try to find the balance between the two. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed.